Good evening. We will now call this school board work session meeting of May 20th, 2014 to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have several announcements tonight. First, executive session. The Board of School Directors met in executive session following the May 6, 2014 special meeting for two items. One, matters of negotiations with the Teamsters, and two, legal matter between John Andrews versus the Methacton School District on bond application to the DCED. Just want to hereby advise the public that the meeting tonight is being audio and video recording for future rebroadcast. Also wanted to make an announcement that Robert Love of Audubon has passed away on May 16th. A lot of folks may know Mr. Love. He had a passion for sports and was a major figure in the Methacton community. He is noted as the initial voice for the Robert Morris Childress field dedication in the community, and he actually passed several weeks after the recent field dedication. So if we could, let's just take a moment of silence in honor of Mr. Love. Thank you. Final announcement. I'd like to announce that I've received the resignation of Joyce Petraskis as a Methacton School Board Director, and I would ask for a motion to accept her resignation. Herb, second.
I'll make that motion.
Brenda, discussion? All those in favor of accepting Mrs. Petraskis' resignation? Opposed? Unanimous. We've accepted her resignation. Dr. Zerbe, if you would put an announcement on the website and in the media and solicit resumes and letters of interest for interested candidates for the board. What will happen now is that the board has 30 days from the date of the resignation to appoint a replacement for the remainder of Mrs. Petraskis' term, which is next December, so December of 2015. Okay, moving on. By way of attendance, all board members are in attendance except Mr. Phillips. Item number 5, public comment on board action items. Is there any public comment on board action items? Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. One of the action items on tonight's agenda is the transportation outsourcing. And various people have a range of ideas on that subject. I said something yesterday at the property committee meeting where 2 of the directors were, and this evening we have 6 or 7 others who didn't hear it. The Wall Street Journal on Friday had an article with a headline of "More Detroits are on the way," and the article was by a Mr. Ravitch, and he had just done a study along with Paul Volcker on fiscal problems of states and cities, and I think indirectly school districts, where some of them have cyclical fiscal problems such as recessions, and some of them also have structural problems where let's say they're just paying too much money on pensions year in and year out, or underfunding pensions. But anyhow, one short sentence struck me as being applicable to the sale of buses. They say, states and cities also sell assets and treat the proceeds as operating revenues, in effect selling the family farm to stay afloat. That seems to apply to our bus situation. And they went on to say that these asset sales lead to harmful service cuts and failure to fund promises to the to the people served, promises to the employees, promises to the taxpayers. So I do not like the busing outsourcing for a number of reasons, one of them being that I think we're selling an asset, and I have yet to hear what we would do with the proceeds, which are on the order of $3 million. Also, I think that putting GPS on buses isn't very convincing to me. I believe the Methacton buses already have radios, and I would suspect that all of the bus drivers have cell phones. And also, the budget, which was going to be addressed at this evening's Finance Committee, the second one in a row to be canceled, is stressful because the coming year is a high pay raise year for the teachers, among others. And I've yet to hear of what the district's enrollment projection is for the fall, but enrollment projections that I've done indicate that this fall, the enrollment in the high school will be down 200 from 2008 when it peaked out. Yet there's been no staff cuts in the high school, even with 200 fewer students. So, and last fall, when the MEA contract was being discussed, one of the information sheets provided to the directors indicated that every year we could count on 25 teacher retirements, and that would make that particular contract more attractive. Well, I think it's not even a handful of teachers retiring so far ahead of next year. So, you know, maybe in addition to enrollment projections, we need better projections on what staff we're going to have at places such as a high school. All in all, I think that at worst, Methacton should be giving the Teamsters a contract on their terms for 2 or 3 years and putting off the first student plan for fuller evaluation rather than in a panic before a budget is due. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, you had a comment? You had your hand up?
Yeah, I didn't know. My next.
Please, yeah.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joe Bickelman from Audubon, PA. I went and did a little research on First Student Services, and I put an email out to the school board and to the administration, and I didn't receive any comments back on that from administration. But I'd just like to go over a few things that I did homework on, and let me just summarize them for you. The Abington School District in Montgomery County discontinued the use of First Student for the 12-13 school year. The Cheltenham School District discontinued the use of First Student for the 13-14 school year. Wissahickon School District, who had a horrendous opening this year in September, had a big outpouring of complaints from the parents, and they decided to go with First Student. Again, they sent RFPs out, but they decided to go with First Student, but on a year-to-year basis with the ability to terminate after 1 year. And that was because of the service. Wissahickon also specified some tips to First Student in order to make sure that the beginning of the year ran smoothly, like do practice runs before the school year started. But as you know, that costs money to do. But Methacton does it. That's why we open with little problem. But Wissahickon School District came up with the ideas for First Student. The next school district, East Penn School District, discontinued the use of First Student for the 14-15 school year. East Penn School District approved a contract with STA for $400,000 more than the First Student bid. First Student had been at East Penn School District since 2007. Lynn Glancy, the district's operation director, said, "We've had some concerns," in quotes, about First Student, but he declined to elaborate. And this information is in, like, the morning call for East Penn, and a lot of this stuff I got from the internet is all from newspaper articles or television reporters. Central Bucks School District, who uses First Student, had problems covering their runs. And on the Central Bucks drivers website, they say they cover between 11 and 15 routes in the morning and afternoon because First Student can't cover the runs. Penn Hill School District, a suburban Pittsburgh school district, they sold their bus fleet in 2011 to First Student. They are going out to change from First Student in the 14-15 school year. I think a lot of the issues, the districts that have contracted services, I think they would like their buses back so that they can control the hiring of the drivers and during the interview process set the high standards for the drivers that they want driving their buses. Well, they've lost control of that. I think going to a contracted service puts another person in the link of communication if there's a problem. Somebody sees a bus problem, a resident sees a bus problem, they see Methacton School District, they call the school district calls First Student, and you have extra time with another person in the chain of command. Bristol Township School District. The district administrators were unhappy with the service and high prices they were receiving with First Students, and they were trying to bring some of their buses back in-house. I covered the St. Louis issue. Down in St. Louis, there was an internal memo got out saying that I believe the managers of the depots received bonuses if they could cut costs for First Student. As far as the finding, I think a lot of the issues with those school districts, the underlying issues probably had to do with, lateness, maybe some safety issues, but they all terminated services with First Student for some reason. And this district is going to enter into a contract for 5 years with First Student. They tried it at Penn Hill School District, they sold their buses, and now they're want to get rid of First Student in the 14-15 school year. So this is just like if you were having work done on your home, you would do a little homework about the contract you're having in your house. So that's what I did. I did a little homework, but I received no feedback from Mr. Whiteleather or Dr. Zerby about these emails that I sent out. Dr. Zerby, did you call any of these districts?
This isn't a question and answer session. This is a public comment session. So you can say whatever you like.
Okay. I think what I would have done if I would have received a memo like this, before I received a memo like this, if I was in my job for the school district, I would have called around. I would talk to people that used First Student or had used First Student and did a little research. I put this in an easy-to-follow email so that you can just get on the phone, talk to the other superintendents at these districts, and say, how did it go? What was your experience? How come you're changing? I mean, that should have been done before I put this email out. That's just a normal process in doing business, especially with a business that's going to be a $6 or $7 million a year contract. How much are we going to get for the buses? The contract that's on the agenda to be approved, does it have that number in there?
This is a public comment session, not a public debate session. Sunshine Law requires the opportunity to make public comment.
I was going to go to a Finance Committee meeting last Tuesday at 6. I was going to go to a Finance Committee meeting tonight at 6:30. Both meetings were canceled. Where do I find out this information? No one got back to me from administration. I sent this to them on Thursday.
Again, sir, you're welcome to make your comments.
You know, I'm not getting nothing of any substance comes out of anyone, even back and forth with the board president. I mean, something substantial needs to come out of someone's mouth. I mean, I'm asking questions about the contract.
So there's going to be a discussion on outsourcing during board action items where Dr. Zerbe is going to make a presentation to the board. As the solicitor said, this isn't question and answer. This is public comment,
All right.
and Dr. Zerbe will go through details when he makes his presentation to the board.
Okay, I took the proposed budget for 14-15 for transportation. It's listed down there as $7,185,000. In that number is a 5.48% increase for salaries for drivers and administrators. It's a $189,000 increase. If I subtract out the state share of Social Security and the state share of retirement, the net cost of operation is $6.6 million. That's the net cost of operation. If you lower that salary increase to 2% and subtract out the state share of Social Security and retirement, the net cost of operation comes down to $6.5 million. So if you take $6.5 million times 5 years, that's $32.5 million for 5 years. I just got a handout on the costs for first student. And this says $33.1 million. See, I'd like to compare the numbers. I'd like to see what the details are so that, you know, I have something as a taxpayer. Because I come up with a number that's $600,000 less. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Candy again. Next.
Candy Oliva, Agaville. First, let me start by saying you are elected officials, and when a taxpayer stands in this room and asks the board a question, no disrespect to Mr. Bartle, but he is just a solicitor, and he's to advise you on legal matters. He's not to speak for the board. You are to speak for yourself, and we have every right to question how you spend our money. We are the taxpayers. Now, as far as the first student, you want to get rid of residents who are taxpayers in this school district to, for whatever reasons, you have given none of us any information on first student, where the money's going to go, how much money, but you're coming back and telling us you want to raise our taxes, and you have the right to spend it any way you see fit with no input from the public. If that's the way you feel about the taxpayers, since, I don't know, they're not in the room, they don't care, they're not in the room, then maybe you're to step off the board. Because we're the one that are paying the bills in this school district. I do not go out and purchase a project until I do my homework and do price comparison. In the May 6th meeting, I saw the pros of first students, I asked for the cons. I got no answer. I've never gotten an answer. Excuse me, Dr. Zerbe has answered my question from this board. Thank God for technology. Sometimes it's a good thing. I found the cons. I'm not pleased with what I saw. Granted, I have no children in the school district, thank God. But next year, if they were, I wouldn't put them on the buses. I don't feel safe in school. I can't see you kicking these people to the curb. You did it to the lunch ladies, you're doing to them. What happens after they lose their jobs, because there's no guarantee that they're going to get hired by first student? None. Promises are always broken. they lose their jobs. You raise their taxes, they lose their homes. How does that benefit the school district? In this economy, how does that benefit us? My question, again, last time was, what are you going to do with the extra money from First Student? Is that going to be added to the turf project that right now we can't afford? We are in debt up to our eyeballs. People are still losing their homes. I have a $500,000 home sitting across the street from me that no one has come out to look at. Every year I have to worry about whether I'm going to lose my home because people that are sitting on this board that are fluid could be gone next year and in a couple years. And once you're gone, we're stuck with the decisions that this board and previous boards have made. And you hide behind PSERS. We understand PSERS is a big problem. The taxpayers didn't create it. The state did. They're at fault. And they refuse to do anything about it. But I don't see why we should be on the hook for the teachers' retirements when you just gave them a nice raise every year. But you want to get rid of these people who work very hard to protect your children every day. And I think instead of rushing this, you need to step back and sit down and make the contract public. You need to start being transparent. Because if you don't want to be, you ought to all become Democrats. Because that's what the Democrats do to us. But you have to answer to the public. We elected, we vote. I can't say I don't know how everybody votes. We are voters, we are taxpayers. We come first in the school district. The students come second. Because without us, the students don't get anything. And I know I've said this for years, this is how I feel. I've paid my way in this life, I've been responsible, and I've been honest. And I expect this out of my elected officials. All of them, regardless of what party you are. But you need to really, instead of rushing this, as everything else has been rushed in the school district, you better look at the face of these people that you want to get rid of. Because the board gave no thought to the lunch ladies, and how has that worked out for us with Aramark? Because we get no information. We have a budget coming up. We have gotten no information. Exactly what cuts are you making? How are you going to make it easier on the taxpayers? I don't believe you're going to. You're going to tell us this is what we have to pay. The taxpayers were smart in this school district. They would refuse in August to pay their taxes. They would refuse. They would put the money in escrow and let you figure out how you're going to pay your bills. So you better think real long and hard about getting rid of members of our community who are taxpayers, parents, and residents. My only other question is this hybrid learning. Is this money to get a grant for this program? The $18,000?
Can't ask the question.
Couldn't scare me. I just need to know if this money is for a grant for this hybrid learning program. Or are we going to apply for a grant to get money to have the program? I'm just curious because if we get this program in place, what's going to happen after the grant runs out? Are we going to have to keep paying for this program? I mean, that's all I'm curious about because I do understand how grants work. And my only thing, one more thing I want to say is, I ran across a quote today when I was looking about the hybrid learning, and it says, "I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots." Albert Einstein stated that years ago. So that's something to really take into consideration. Technology is a great thing, but sometimes too much of a great thing is not good.
Good evening, my name is Jeff Butler. I'm a resident of Eagleville, parent of a 4th grade student here. I have nothing against these two gentlemen here from First Student. They've come here to do a job, and I think they've done it quite well. I say they've done their job a little too well, though, because my common sense warning is going off the charts, okay? I know you've all heard the saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Are any of you thinking that right now? And no, you don't have to answer? Everything they're offering sounds great. And the answers they give always seem to be the right answers. Let's think about this. They've agreed to let us, Methacton, do the bus routing. They've agreed to hire all the willing drivers to come join them. Not only that, they've agreed to pay us our current rate. They've also agreed to offer the current drivers an HMO health plan. A crappy plan, but better than nothing. When confronted about situations that involve going back to pick up students that missed the bus, about waiting for parents running late to greet their children off the bus, when asked about what they'll do in situations involving split custody or split drop-offs, the response was always, "We will follow your policy." Wow, doesn't that sound great? Now do me a favor and think about this for a minute. How did First Student, the largest student transportation company in America, one of the largest student transportation companies in the world, how did they get to be that way? Do you think it was because they were letting other people do their routing? Following other school districts' policies? Do you think it was by hiring people, hiring workers at over 30% above what their national average of pay is? And offering them health care? What's your common sense saying right now? Because mine's screaming a resounding no. So if they're agreeing to do this for the first 5-year contract, what on earth do you think is going to happen when it's time to sign the next one? If you think it's all going to be the same, you're obviously living in a fairy tale world, because there's no way that's going to happen. They're absolutely going to make up for lost revenue from this contract, and in doing so, probably knock you unconscious with the figures and policy changes on the next one. Then what? Then what are you going to do? Your leverage will be gone because your buses will be gone. We'll basically be at their mercy. Again, you don't have to answer this, as theoretical. How many of you on the school board have thought this out this far? How many of you have even started to consider what happens 5 years when this contract would end? How many of you have taken the time to research what the average increase of First Student follow-up contract is? How many of you have talked to other school districts who currently or formerly use First Student regarding this? How many of you have taken the time to find out why school districts who use or previously used First Student don't do business with them anymore or are trying to break ties? I know you all say you're in the business of education, not the transportation business, but I think this is just a cop-out to justify making the mistake of outsourcing. If you were just in the business of education, I don't think you'd be floating a $5 million bond to put turf on 2 fields. Who's that educating? You're really in the business of children, and part of that includes getting them to and from their education, safely by people who care about them and their jobs. Our students, my child, your nephew, your grandson, your daughter, your neighbors, these kids are the most precious cargo that gets transported through our townships. And if you feel that's not your concern, well, maybe you're in the wrong business. When First Student hires new drivers to replace the ones that are retiring or others who just leave, they're going to pay them what, $18 an hour? No benefits? Now I know when some people hear we make $26.45, they think, wow, that's a lot of money. But when you think about my 5-hour run takes up 8 to 10 hours of my day, if I thought of my day as an 8-hour day, I really make $16.53 an hour. So when First Student comes by and pays these drivers $18 an hour, their day will essentially be worth $11.25 an hour for their 8-hour day. Now ask yourselves, theoretically, because you won't answer yourself, what kind of people are you going to get for that little money, especially if they're not getting benefits? How much are these people who would be driving our kids going to care about their job? More importantly, how are they going to care about our kids? Is this what our kids, the future of Methacton, the future of Montgomery County, the future of Pennsylvania, the future of America, is this what they deserve? I say no. They deserve competent, compassionate drivers who not only love and care about their jobs, but care about the children. If you vote for this outsourcing, the people in this room, the families of Methacton, and more importantly to you, the taxpayers, will know what you really think of our kids, the most precious cargo that gets transported through our townships. Please do the right thing. Don't let yourself be persuaded. Use your common sense. Think about how much you care about our kids, and vote no to outsourcing. Thank you for your time.
We'll let the record show that Mr. Phillips is in attendance. Further public comment on board action items? Okay. Moving on to board action items. I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Frank McMullen. I have the pleasure of being one of your bus drivers. And I do say it is a pleasure. I first come to the microphone to ask for a point of clarity. Since this motion was tabled, when will it be untabled and will it be a public matter?
So it would be untabled. The motion will be up on board action items, so the next item after public comment.
So is it going to be voted on tonight? Is that what I understand?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now I have a few comments. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, but I was able to catch it online, which I commend you all for. I think that is a great way to do business. Put it online so that everybody can see what happens if you're not able to make a meeting. I understand being an executive board is a very tough position to make. When you're making decisions that impact everybody, I know those decisions aren't easy. I've served on the board myself, so I can sympathize. That being said, it comes with grave responsibility, and it needs to be taken seriously, especially in the matters when it comes to children's safety. As I reviewed the minutes from the last meeting, Mr. Whiteleather put together quite an interesting presentation. I do notice from his PowerPoint presentation that he had, he pointed out several of the reasons that he felt was important to go with this move other than cost. He pointed out operational effects. The largest national contractor. Well, folks, larger doesn't always necessarily mean better. When I was growing up, we had a little corner store we went to, and that person knew everyone in the neighborhood. And you go in, how are you today, Frank? Pretty good. How's the family? Real good. You need more milk, you need this. You have interpersonal conversations, customer service. All those things can't be overlooked. They get pushed aside for the bigger chains who come in, push the little mom and pop operations out of the way. Those things aren't here anymore. Now customer service is in the toilet. Nobody knows your name, nobody knows your family, no one cares. So bigger doesn't always necessarily mean better. The next point he had was technology, GPS. As it's already been pointed out here, GPS is a tool, and it's a tool if it's used properly. But you already have those tools available in your buses right now. You have two-way radios in each one of these buses that these drivers are contacted on a regular basis, day in and day out. And it's not just about where you at, what time is it. These folks call in, you don't realize it. You got Town Watch right here in every one of these 100 buses that you get at no cost for nothing. They go out in the morning, I've heard them report, can you call 911? There was just an accident, the car overturned in front of me. These people have saved lives, day in and day out. And that's not taken into consideration in this budget here. What you guys don't understand, and I'm not saying that you don't understand because I can't speak for you, but the way that it appears is that it's not taking the whole thing in total. I've heard them calling on accidents. I've heard them calling on buildings on fire. I heard them calling on the radio that a dog was running down the middle of the road, that it was going to get hit, or that it was going to cause an accident. I've heard them contact each other. Hey, bus number so-and-so, I know you're right behind me. This car just blew through my red lights and almost hit a child. Thank God I was able to yell out the window and the kid didn't step in the street. Can you see if you can get a description of that car so we can report that to the police? These are all things that go on a day-to-day basis. And by y'all not being in the bus, by you not being there, things go unnoticed. So it's important that they're brought to your attention. Nothing can replace a human being. These folks interact and make the split decisions day in and day out, every day. And there's not a one of them, not a one, that doesn't put the safety of these children first. And that comes from not only the drivers, the casuals at the bottom, that comes from your transportation and supervisor, who a lot of them don't like. But I'm going to tell you, I work for the second largest employer in the United States. I'm a professional driver. I have been for 30 years. I was a driver safety instructor, and safety here is taken seriously. It's not just a blanket that's thrown out there to discipline drivers when it's not needed. And I seriously think that that's being overlooked. These people come in, some of them a half hour, 45 minutes in their own time before they even hit the clock to make sure that their buses are ready, that their routes are ready, so that the children are taken care of. Technology can't replace these things. The next point he made up was that he was a national leader, okay? That they bring key elements as a national leader. That's an awful vague topic. It's real easy to put out there. They're a national leader. Nobody disputes that they're a national company. They got there by taking over little mom and pop companies like here. Long-term contract and stability. Long-term relationship with the vendors. Well, I don't know if you're all aware of it or not, but you all have had a long-term contract here. I did a little research, and I was amazed at what I found. I found out that the Methacton School District was a combination of the Lower Providence and the Warminster School District that have joined together in 1960. They became the Methacton School District, the Lower Providence School District, which was formed in 1884. It goes through to have all the schools and everything that Lower Providence Township. At about 1945, the school district began to pay the transportation for pupils going to neighboring school districts at the secondary education. Pupils were initially paid to ride public transportation. Later, school buses were hired. Beginning in 1953, the school district began to purchase its own buses. Where the students were transferred to neighboring schools where they were able to attend the high school. The Worcester Township School District, which began in 1848. It's going back a ways. You talk about long-term commitment to the community? Oh, it gets better. I wish my wife let me talk this much at home. The first transportation was provided in 1916. 1916, that's pretty impressive. To provide the first transportation with the purchase of a 2-ton Republic truck chassis for $1,525, which was a boatload of money back then. And the bus body for the chassis was built by the Boyertown Carriage Company. So they bought a truck and made a school bus going back that far. Long-term commitment. The Worcester School District continued to operate until the jointure of the Lower Providence was culminated in 1961. Lower Providence and the Worcester Township joined together and merged into what became the Methacton School District in 1968. Which generated you all being here, because you're a culmination of the two school districts joining together to come together to bring the 9 board members to work the 2 school districts to become one. I think that pretty much covers long-term commitment. Employee recruitment. Mr. Whiteleather said that our assets are our drivers. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to tell you something. I came here looking for a part-time job, and what I found is incredible. These people, I've never seen so many people with so much compassion and caring, that care about not only their job, but the kids who get on and off that bus every day. They are the first face that those children see once those doors open up, and they are the last face that they see once those doors close and those children go home for the day. And whether you realize it or not, they do a pretty damn good job of representing this school district. okay? They have to deal with sensitive issues. They have children who come on and have to be sensitive enough to come and say, hey, by the way, my dog died. You're dealing with this. Oh, Jimmy keeps looking at me funny. Meanwhile, they're operating a commercial vehicle with everybody and their mother who's trying to get around them. Safety is paramount with these people. And I echo Jeff's response. These folks at First Student, I have nothing against them. They're here for a business, but they're a for-profit organization. You're not going to get the intangibles that you have with these people who are driving your buses today. It's just not going to happen. I see signs. I saw one today over Belvoir Road. Romano's hiring First Student, hiring drivers. Perkiomen Township, hiring drivers. People come here to Methacton, most of it's word of mouth. Hey, you need a job? I know a good place to look for you. Who are you giving your word of mouth to? You're not giving it to some schlub off the street, especially if you live in this township and it's transporting your children. You're only having people that you recommend. So if you're having trouble at Methacton keeping enough drivers on base with the package that you're offering now, what makes you think that you're going to get a better, more qualified, more people from First Student who's already looking for their own drivers? It's just not going to happen, folks. It's not going to happen. No system is perfect. So your assets, as you say it, which I'm going to quite tell you frankly, they don't feel like assets today. They don't feel like assets since this whole process has been going on. This whole process has seemed like you all are trying to fit a square peg in a round hole from day one. And it's just not fair. The way that it's been approached is you had negotiations with the union, and it come down, well, guess what? A negotiation is only if both sides are talking. If you're going to meet with the union and tell them, we're going with First Student, this is what we're proposing to take care of your drivers, that's not a negotiation. I'm sorry, folks. Mr. Whiteleather also pointed out that when the proposals went out, we followed up with detailed analysis of the proposals and went over the analysis to make sure that we got everything right. Well, as Mr. Bickelman seems to have the numbers well pointed out, they don't seem to match up real well. Finance meetings keep getting canceled. These folks aren't able to get answers. This is almost like a communist state. And in this country of ours, that's a disgrace. It truly is. It's a disgrace. When we sit here close to 35 miles away from where our forefathers were the birthplace of democracy for freedom, for this country, and for the world. We sit here today on Election Day, and what's going on here today is an abomination. There's certain services that our forefathers felt were so vital to the development and the growth and survival of the community and the nation that they should never be exposed to the possibility of greed, corruption, or the manipulation of people with money. The public services must be made available, and not only to the rich, but to those who can afford them, not only those who can pay for them. Services such as the military, our law enforcement, our fire, our rescue services, public libraries, public schools, your postal service, these are all the pillars of what makes a nation a nation. You know who doesn't have those? North Korea, China, where they keep their people oppressed. This is a disgrace. What's going on here is what's going on across the country. There's been an attack on the middle class. First it comes from the government, then it comes from the big corporations who also took raises, who also gave raises to their buddies, the teachers. Right? Not to say that the teachers don't earn them or deserve them, because teaching is probably one of the hardest professions that you can do. And the teachers are a dedicated group of people, and I understand that as well. But they also benefit from unions. Okay? And what's going on here is a disgrace. This is nothing more than union busting. You people are sitting down here to take care of these. You're pulling away jobs. You're going to send them to another place, and if they're able to get the votes when they get there, we'll recognize their contract. Meanwhile, you're pulling their contract away from them. That's not right. That's not right, folks. This is being pushed through. In my opinion, there's some public or personal feelings, some personal vendettas that have gone into it. I have no proof of that. But you guys are public servants and you're elected officials. And you're tasked with doing what's best for the school district, for the community, and most of all, for the students. And if you can look at these numbers, and you look at everything that's going on here, and you can honestly say that that's the best thing for this school district, then you should have the courage to stand up when you vote in front of these people, in front of the people on the internet, and in front of the world to say, I vote to contract it out, or I vote not to contract it out, based on these reasons. And that's what I challenge you to do. And the people who are at home, I challenge you to hold these people accountable, because they do work for you. Not just today, not just tomorrow. When you see them at the store, picking up the groceries, when you see them 5 years from now, when your buses are gone and your children are waiting on the corner out in the rain and there's nobody to pick them up. Thanks for voting against us. Thanks for screwing our community. That's what you need to tell them. Every day they need to be held accountable. Because I pretty much know all y'all. Anybody who's got an opinion here is not afraid to stand up and say it. And if you're not willing to do that as an elected official, then you should be ashamed of yourself. I'm asking you to do the right thing. I'm pleading to your sense of duty, to your sense of commitment. You know, these people don't just drive your children around. They're driving in your community on your roads. Now, when I used to teach driver safety, we had a principle. It was called Drive for 5. And the idea of that was that if you drive your vehicle like you're in the center, and the 4 vehicles that are all around you are your family, you're going to drive a heck of a lot different, because the people that are most important to you are in those vehicles. You folks already have that, because what's important to these people are already in these vehicles. We're going to answer a question now? Or? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm making too much sense. I thank you for your time, and I challenge you. Do the right thing.
Excuse me, sir, can you come back, sir? Sir, can you come back to the mic and please state your name and your address and town for the record, please? I'm not sure I caught that when you started. Thanks.
Sure, I'd first like to say that, first of all, I'm under understanding it was a public comment. My name is Frank McMullen, and I am a bus driver.
Are you, a resident of the school district?
Does that matter if it's public comment? No, I'm not. See, I'm not like you. I'm not afraid to answer questions. I'm a member of Collegeville. Since you got me here, when I got hired here, I went to Perkiomen Township. Oh, you're going to cut me off now, huh?
No. I just wanted to let you know that when you come to the mic, and if anybody else comes to the mic, you have to state your name and where you're from, so we know where you're from. That's all. For the record, please. Everybody does that. Right, Candy?
You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
I understand that.
Okay.
The executive boards I've been on answer to their membership, too, and the people who put them there.
Additional public comment? Any additional public comment? Okay. Move on to board action items. Dr. Zerbe?
Regarding items listed in number 6, board action items, I have a few comments, Mr. President, before I ask you to move on to item 6.1, transportation outsourcing. Prior to talking about that, I just want to make one other statement. I think it's important that, for the record, we recognize that we have moved the Finance Committee meeting on 2 occasions. And certainly that was done for the single purpose that that was acted upon this evening. You may be aware earlier in this evening, as an announcement was made, that we accepted a resignation of a board member. That board member led the Finance Committee, and therefore it put us in a position not to be able to run the meetings as we had originally planned. So I do apologize for that. We do plan that after these board action items to go into a presentation of the board as we would have typically done on the budget. Now on to transportation outsourcing. As a follow-up to the May 6th special meeting and at the April 22nd presentation on transportation outsourcing, I just want to make it clear that this was nearly a year-long process. It started somewhere in the neighborhood with an official action by the board in September of 2013. And that was and prior to putting out that RFP, there was significant consideration by the administration at the time and the board at the time as to what that really meant. But I can tell you that as time went on, all the information that was provided to us was provided to the board. That same information, the RFP, the responses, all the data and the tabulations that our administration had put together was also not only provided to the board, but provided to the Teamsters as part of our negotiation process, which lasted nearly that entire duration. The information was carefully reviewed. The RFP responses, the comparative analysis conducted by my administration and provided to the Teamsters and our board for their analysis and consideration. I'm not only recommending this evening the lowest bid responder to this RFP, but I believe the most appropriate vendor for our employees as part of this transition. It is my intent that our employees become first student employees and that we keep the routes and drivers the same. This is the best transition plan for our families and students as well. We picked an experienced company with a proven track record and success in K-12 transportation. We will continue to apply the Methacton policies and practices moving forward, while we will also consider options for improving services while keeping the safety at our forefront. We will become among the 73% of the Commonwealth K-12 institutions who currently utilize contracted transportation services. Some nearby examples include North Penn, Norristown, who are currently seeking a renewal with First Student, Colonial School District, recently renewed for another 4 years, Wissahickon School District's in conversations with them, Lowell Moreland, to name a few. We have factored flexibility into our agreement so that we have the right of first refusal in the buyback of our buses, if need be, and the board reserves the right to utilize the locked-in second 5 years of rates if they so choose to. The first 5 years will be locked in at an increase no greater than 2.5% each year, and the second 5 years not to exceed 1.7%, with an overall estimated savings of $8.2 million over 10 years. We do appreciate the comments from our drivers, from the public, but this evening it is my recommendation to outsource transportation to First Student, and I believe this is a responsive measure to our taxpayers, and as a result of that, it is the most appropriate for our employees and our families as part of this transition. I ask the President to move forward with an action on item 6.1 on the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Accordingly, action 6.1, I would ask that we have a motion to approve the administration to outsource district transportation and authorize the administration to negotiate the contract with First Student Incorporated, and then to have the solicitor prepare a document for final board adoption. Is there a motion? Herb, is there a second? Brenda, discussion?
I'll open, please. First of all, I would like to state that I have 2 children in the school district who are picked up Monday through Friday by 2 wonderful drivers. I think highly of our drivers. I trust them with the lives of my children. I believe that these drivers will do the same work for First Student.
Please.
Well, you know what? That just changed my opinion a little bit. I'm finished. Thank you.
Any other board comment? Kim?
Yes, I noticed during the public comment on our board action items that our First Student reps were taking some notes, and I wondered if it was appropriate, if they had anything to offer, to add, to supplement some of the comments that were made.
Do you have anything you want to mention to the board at this point?
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you for the opportunity to address some of the comments that were made here tonight. Some of the comments made tonight were that Cheltenham School District desired to cease and desist operations with First Student. I'm not sure where that fact came from. The fact is, Cheltenham School District put it out for RFP, which many school districts do after so many years of service with the current contract. Unfortunately, there was a competitor who underbid our rates by 16%. Where that 16% came from? Off the backs of the drivers. As a company, we said we're not going to do that. We're not going to lower our rates that low. So it wasn't for service failure or service issues. It was an RFP and it was down to cost. Same thing for Abington School District. Same exact situation. Wissahickon, while there were service issues in the beginning of the year, those service issues got fixed. Like any business, unfortunately, we had some issues in the beginning of the year. They were brought to our attention. We made strides to correct them. Obviously, the Wissahickon School District has a faith in First Student because they renewed the contract. There was a statement that the Wissahickon School District had to provide First Student tips on how to operate more efficiently. The example was practice runs, also called dry runs. That also is not a truth. They put certain items in the RFP that they desired. 2 dry runs for all drivers, 3 dry runs for new drivers. They put in how often they wanted their buses washed. That was for the benefit of all bidders. That was not to tell First Student what we needed to know. The East Penn School District, again, discontinued service. That's incorrect. It was an RFP. And while the initial data looked about $400,000 more expensive than First Student, there was a propane option that the district chose. It was quoted of Mr. Glancy that there were concerns with First Student. The ironic part is, 2 weeks after the vote, Mr. Glancy was terminated. Central Bucks School District, statement was made they're covering 11 to 15 routes. That again is not true. They're covering 8 routes that we never took since the beginning of this year. They wanted us to cover, we could not. They're not covering 11 to 15. We have 80-plus customers in the state of Pennsylvania who are very happy with our service. I can tell you in eastern Pennsylvania, right in your backyard, William Penn School District, Colonial School District, Lower Moreland School District, Norristown School District, Pleasant Valley School District, Penargil School District, and Northampton School District. All very happy customers. You can check that. You can call them and do a reference check. Bristol Township, again, unhappy with services and high prices. They also went to bid, rolled back the rate 16% and broke the union, at least temporarily. We chose not to go that route. I guess in closing, we are very excited to operate this contract if that's what the board so chooses to vote. We truly hope all the same drivers that are currently transporting all the students we've heard about tonight, the vice president's children, we hope that they retain because that is the integrity of this school district. And that's going to be the success. And I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to make comments.
Thank you.
My name is Randy Williams.
Other comment or? Okay. Additional, Mark?
Can I ask some questions of Randy?
Sure.
Randy, just 3 questions. It's my understanding that most current drivers will be hired by First Union. Is that true?
First Student, yes.
Sorry.
We are going to offer all the drivers employment opportunities, and as long as they're qualified, which I assume they are if they're qualified to drive now. Yes.
And further, they're being hired at their same hourly rate.
Absolutely correct.
Will they be using the same buses that they use today?
Yes, with the exception of any fleet that we bring in to replace older fleet.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional comments? Questions from the board? Anyone? Okay. Jim, go ahead.
Good evening. Long day, but long night. It has been a year that we've been working on this. There's been a lot of tough questions of the administration for a student. One that I was very critical of everything from the way the contract was written down to the building, who's paying for electric, who's paying for repairing the facility, how the drivers are going to be transitioned, how are the benefits going to be handled. You know, going to bat for your employees comes in many forms, and we've asked the tough questions. We've tried to work things out to make it manageable on the tax side, the money side. We try to work it out with our constituents, people that sit in the audience that tell us that they can't live in this community anymore, and it's very hard because they have bills and they can't afford another tax increase. But, you know, where are we to go? I mean, for 33 plus years, we've raised taxes every single year in this district, to the point where a lot of people can't afford here. 2 years ago when I was doing door-to-door and I was in East Norton, I was talking to people that lived in their house since the 50s. They bought their house for $7,500 and their taxes were $10,000. Their taxes were more than what they paid for their house, and they were basically buying their house every single year. And that's not right either. And we have to balance everything. We look at every aspect. So when it comes to our employees, I take it very seriously. One thing that I look for is solutions. What am I hearing from my employees, my directors, as far as a solution to help this situation out? It's not going away. It keeps creeping up. Our budget this year, if it isn't $1/10 billion, it's getting out of hand. We can't afford to keep increasing every year. I'm not saying that it's something that you're doing on the backs of your employees. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's either we try to correct things, whether it's reducing the number of employees or cutting expenses. I mean, it has to happen. I mean, and I've done it in my own life. I mean, I can't do a lot of things because the books don't balance out at the end of the day because of the economy. There were years that this district was increasing taxes by 3.5%. The tax ratables that were coming in, we were increasing at 3.5%, but we were increasing our budget by 7%. You cannot exist with increasing the budget that much every year and then expect to be able to maintain it. And I know our administration has reached out to the union to see if they can work things out to keep you. And I'd rather that situation. I really would. And, you know, I'm not hearing that, okay, first student, they're the people that we're saying is who we're going to sub out to. But I'm not hearing any other suggestions as far as whether it's Romano, whether it's some other organization that you feel would be better than First Student. I need solutions. I hear you. And it pains me to have to be put in this situation because yes, I have employees. I have people that sit in the audience in the front here that come to every meeting that don't want the high taxes. And what solutions do we have? What concessions do we have to make it that it's still affordable and you're still our people? And that's what I'd like to hear from the body. I mean, that's what I want to know.
Additional board comments? No? I'll just make the one comment. It's certainly come up tonight. I know that no board member has taken this lightly. You know, the idea of homework has come up. I've seen this board do its homework on this issue. I've seen the administration do work around this. A couple of folks had mentioned sending emails and not getting a response. It's just practically impossible for every board member to respond to every email that they get, but I have seen most, if not all, every board member respond to myself and to Dr. Zerby and Stewart with questions, digging into the issues. So I want to make sure that that's known. The board doesn't enter into these decisions lightly. The board has done their work on this, and if you might not have gotten a response to your email, but it certainly has been read, and certainly questions have been asked because of it. That said, if there's no other comment, I'll ask for a vote. The motion on the floor, as moved by Herb and seconded by Brenda, is to approve the administration to outsource district transportation, authorize administration to negotiate a contract with First Student, and have solicitor prepare a document for final board adoption. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes.
Thanks for the verbs.
Item number 2, hybrid learning assessment. Dr. Zerby.
I presented at 2 previous meetings regarding the hybrid learning assessment. Again, if it's okay with the president, I'll just give like 2 minutes here till people clear out. In 2 previous meetings, we spoke about and gave lengthy detail on the hybrid learning assessment. Basically, hybrid learning, as I previously mentioned, this assessment will allow us to determine the best avenues possible for the use and the infusion of technology to help supplement and complement the instructional practices within the Methacton School District. Additionally, you're all aware that we are trying to address high school scheduling concerns, not only from parents and students and our staff. We also believe that this assessment will also lend us the opportunity to discover how we can additionally use technology to supplement some of those requests and making some changes and alterations to our scheduling process to help gain access for our students. So this assessment essentially will provide the district with a report not only to, and as the comment was made, not only to apply for the grant that will be available in September for hybrid learning. And I just want to explain what that is. It's really not a program of buying equipment, or it's not used for those types of things. It's actually used to help put in place instructional practices and best practices in a train-the-trainer model to help our district undertake different services within the hybrid learning model. In the end, we're asking for your approval for the cost of $18,000, with 9 of that being paid in the 13-14 school year, and the other 9 being paid and budgeted for in the 14-15 school year. Are there any questions related to the hybrid learning assessment?
This is for preparing for a grant application. What magnitude would the grant be that you would be seeking? Is it 100,000, 200,000?
It's a minimum of 100,000. It's called an implementation grant.
Okay. And it would cover equipment as well as training and things of that sort?
Typically, it would not cover equipment. Our hope is to utilize the existing resources as well as utilize the pending resources of Bring Your Own Device that our Director of Technology is implementing in the district. It's not an asset-driven component. It's really about changing instructional practices and providing an assessment of how we can best utilize our existing resources and those resources that we're currently bringing to bear for our children. So it's not it'll be one that we hope as a train-the-trainer model will continue to perpetuate teaching and learning and professional development within the district.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, I guess for further clarity for myself, could you talk a little bit about how this hybrid blended learning interfaces with our METS program?
It's a good question. The METS program, the Methacton Educational Technology Standards, is a program that I believe was, and Mr. Harney, you're going to have to help me. This was here before my time. I believe it started about a year ago, probably when Mr. Sosnovic became Director of Technology within the district. So it was one of his projects. And certainly, for those who don't know, the METS program really provides a collaborative environment for currently our staff to work with iPads in the district and to be able to implement the use of those iPads in our curriculum within the district. So how does this program work with that? I think what it does is it allows us to take this at a higher level and bring in some of the resources and knowledge from across the country. The entire hybrid learning model is really a West Coast philosophy that has come to the East Coast, has been picked up by our legislature and our governor as a model to help districts implement the use of technology in their curriculum. The idea can be multifaceted. It can allow us to, grow those things that we're already doing in the METS program, as well as look at ways of supplementing and fixing some of the problems we have with our scheduling at the high school and provide more access for our students. So, for example, the concept that's floated around in this is, okay, instead of having, a full set of meet 42 minutes a day for X number of days, you meet a portion of that in a physical classroom and a portion of that online, so that you can fit into the schedule those additional courses and gain exposure for our students in a number of ways and still get full credits for those programs. So our students are hungry for access to the curriculum. You know that for the past 2 years, our high school principal has been working very hard to try to address the access issue with trying to get students to access to more programs. We believe that once we have an outside evaluator look at the way we use technology, they can make recommendations to us about how we best can not only utilize it within the METS program, but also use it in helping us offset some scheduling concerns.
Yeah, we got to see the iPads in action when we did the tours of the schools.
That's right.
So that was neat to see.
And if I could just say, since the METS program was mentioned here, I just want to make a public announcement related to that. The Methacton Student Technology Showcase, which is a offshoot of that METS program, is going to take place on the May 27th meeting between 5:45 and 6:45. It's a showcase of our students' uses of technology in the district. I encourage everyone from the public and our board members to participate in that. It will involve 80 students, over 25 teachers in the process. So it'll be in our cafeteria, and then after that session, we will convene here to the LGI for the scheduled board meeting.
Okay, so anything else on hybrid learning?
I do not.
You have a question?
I guess just one follow-up question. Is the use of technology incorporated as something mandatory within the Common Core structure?
The PA Common Core? I can tell you that Mary is really our expert on the PA Common Core. I would believe there are components assigned to this, but for me to tell you exactly, I can't do that at this moment in time, but I can surely get that information to you. Do you know, Mr. Harney?
Just one of the elements of this concept will allow us to actually go further with the Common Core. It extends a lot of what we can do with our students, so it's going to extend their opportunities to allow us to reach more of the Common Core than we can right now with our current structure at the high school, especially in high school.
Okay, anything else, Dr. Zerbe?
I do not.
Okay, so then I'll ask for a motion to approve the hybrid learning assessment for Methacton School District with Delacour Strategies to complete the assessment and provide a proposal for operational support, professional development services, and necessary documentation to submit a grant application with a cost of $18,000, half in this year and half in next budget year. Is there a motion? Mark, second. Kim? Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? You have approval. Okay, moving on to scheduled speakers and presentations. So just to clarify one thing, Dr. Zerbe will be doing a proposed final budget presentation tonight. We did have a Finance Committee meeting scheduled for today. We did cancel that due to the resignation of one board member and the limited availability of another. So I asked Dr. Zerbe to take the entire board through the presentation as he would have at Finance Committee. So we'll essentially be going to that information, but now the whole board and public. So please, Dr. Zerbe.
So I ask that the board please take their seats in the front, and Mr. Whiteleather and I will begin our presentation. Yeah, there's some water right over in the corner. Before Mr. Whiteleather begins, I just want to make a couple comments on the budget. The budget presentation for you this evening is provided as a follow-up to our last presentation before the board in March. Since then, we've had Finance Committee meetings in April, and we also had a subsequent Finance Committee recommendation to the board that a budget be prepared and presented to the board that does not exceed a tax increase of 2.1%, which is the state index for Methacton School District. The budget process started in September, well before I started here in Methacton, where Mr. Whiteleather and I began discussing the fiscal sustainability of the Methacton School District and how we can establish a culture of accountability and responsibility to our taxpayers, at the same time continue providing high-level academic, cultural, and academic opportunities for our students. To that end, we have led a process with the following: a focus on expenditure reductions and operational efficiencies. 2, the consideration of new academic programs where data suggests need. 3, long-term projection model, a 5-year plan, something that I understand the district has asked for the longest time, and we provided that to you and to the public for your review. 4, a focus on replenishing the fund balance to address lower than state recommended levels. 5, a focus on a 5-year capital plan and how to properly fund capital improvements in the budget. And 6, and lastly, this presentation here this evening also includes a new concept for this evening, establishment of a PSERS escrow account, which we believe will, as we explain later, will ask for a recommendation on that or a discussion on that from the board. But that is the newest of the 6 items that we had to focus on for this presentation. Therefore, without any further ado, I want to ask Mr. Whiteleather to begin the proposed final budget presentation for the board and the public. Mr. Whiteleather.
All right, thank you very much. What we're going to do tonight is go over the proposed final budget for the school district for the 14-15 year. Basically, what I want to do is start off quickly going over the budget timeline. Basically, any more budgets are almost a 12-month process. There's really a limited period of time where you're not either in planning stages or actively working on the budget due to the Act 1 calendar, as well as just all of the factors that go into developing a budget for a school district. So you can see we basically started in September preparing the budget calendar and distributing that to our building principals, departmental supervisors, anyone who has input relative to budgetary needs for operations. As you can see, looking down below through the rest of the balance of the calendar year. November 15th was the deadline for principals to submit back their budget request, followed by superintendent, myself, as well as the assistant to the superintendent for personnel, met with each of the departmental supervisors and building principals in November and December to go over the budget request. We kicked off our initial budget meetings with the Finance Committee and the school board in January, followed by our preliminary budget approval on February 18th. Over the next couple of months leading up to today, we've had several Finance Committee meetings as well as full board updates on the budget. This evening, May 20th, we were to have a Finance Committee. Obviously, that was canceled relative to allowing the full board review of our proposed final budget. The way Act 1 works is you have to have a proposed final budget in place. It has to be approved. That document is then publicly available for a period of time before the board can act on the final operational budget. So for next week, next Tuesday, we would be asking for your approval of the proposed final budget. After that date, leading up to our June board meeting, will be public advertisement of the budget document for the 14-15 year. June 17th would be our asking for your approval of the 14-15 final budget, and then July 1 would be the start of our next operational year. What are some of the significant changes that have occurred since our preliminary adoption on February 18th? Obviously, first and foremost is transportation outsourcing, which you approved this evening. That line item relative to next year for the 14-15 year is a savings for the school district of $600,000. Building departmental budget reductions. One of the key items for us relative to putting together the budget under the constraints of Act 1 and the limited ability we have to fund our operations, we went back to our building departmental supervisors and directors and asked for them to make budget reductions, which amounted to 10% for the buildings and $50,000 for facilities as well as technology. Teacher retirements. We had a number of teacher retirements that have come recently and reflected of the dollar decrease that you see associated to that. The medical and prescription insurance rate decrease of $500,000, that's a result of us having joined the Bucks Montgomery Health Consortium. Last year, if you recall, the district saved almost $1 million between staying fully insured as we were prior to July 1, 2013, to what we are now self-insured through the Bucks Montgomery Trust. So over the last 2 years, or this year as well as next year, our participation in that consortium has saved the district about $1.4 million. Our EIT, interest earnings, transportation reimbursement, as well as Evansburg, have all been adjusted upward. Again, you base that on your trends. How are things trending versus prior years? Our EIT, I believe I mentioned this before, is doing extraordinarily well. Our interest earnings, we have actively moved our money into banks paying better liquid interest rates than we would receive through fixed investments. That particular line item alone has earned the district approximately $30,000 more than last year. Transportation reimbursement will be improved based upon replacement of our bus fleet. Newer vehicles achieve a higher reimbursement rate by the Department of Education. And lastly, Evansburg State Park. We receive money from the state relative to properties that are located on the Evansburg State Park. There was a piece of legislation that had gone through the state that had given us some indication that that payment from the state was going to stop. However, we did receive payment for this fiscal year, so thus we are carrying that forward to next fiscal year until we hear differently at this juncture. Our legal fees, we've adjusted down again based on trend. Our utilities, our participation through our participation in the Montgomery County Intermediate Consortium has been advantageous for us over the last few years. And again, looking forward, we're reflecting a decrease relative to our preliminary budget. Our debt and budget reserve, again, reflecting of the most recent information we were able to obtain, is also resulting in a reduction. And then lastly, the ABG, or the Ready to Learn grant. This was what the governor had proposed back on his initial budget presentation. At this point, based upon the latest information we have, the state's budget overall is not doing great. They're forecasting a relatively significant deficit for next year, and as a result, in speaking with several legislators in the area, there is a high indication that that Ready to Learn grant probably will not be available for the next fiscal year. So those funds were removed from preliminary to proposed this evening. What have we done historically relative to saving the district funds? Yes?
How many retirees do we have so far?
We have 4. Historical budget savings, if you look at, for example, Aramark, back in the 2009-2010 fiscal year, the general fund contribution to the food service fund amounted to $380,000. Currently, that amount is 0, and actually Aramark for the 13-14 year has guaranteed the school district a profit of approximately $90,000. Our activity fee for middle school and high school students, as you see, generated $77,000 in 12-13, and to date, we've achieved about $62,000 approximately for the current year to date. STS, yes.
Less participation or lower fees or?
We anticipate the collections to be equal to where they were previous years, but it's just a matter of, the timing of it. The STS professional long-term subs, as you remember when we negotiated our teacher's contract and settled teacher's contract, one of the key items we removed was our long-term subs. All of our day-to-day as well as our long-term subs are with STS, and that has provided a savings to the school district of $175,000. Early retirement incentives. If you recall, back in 13-14, we had 19 teacher retirements as a result of the early retirement incentive. That achieved an overall savings for the school district of nearly $800,000. As I spoke about previously, our participation in the Bucks Montgomery Health Consortium, we saved $900,000 over staying fully insured for the current year. And again, I spoke about our decrease in premiums for the 14-15 year. And that's going to save the district another $500,000. So a very positive thing for us to join the Bucks Montgomery Health Consortium. They're a very proactive group in looking to minimize and, in our case, decrease our premiums, which is a very good thing for us as an organization looking forward. Reduce building budgets. Sorry. Go ahead.
So does that mean that $1.4 million is the savings from last year until next year?
Correct. We saved $900,000.
Next year it'll be $1.4 million savings.
Well, from this year to next year, from 13-14 to 14-15 year, we're going to save an additional $500,000.
So it's $1.4 million.
Correct. Reduce building budgets. Last year, we took a similar approach relative to reducing our budget increase from our preliminary budget to our final. All building budgets were reduced by $10,000 across the board. And then lastly, looking at reducing our professional staff. Just as a historical point of reference, we had 445 teachers in 2010-11. We are currently at 422. So you can see we're down 23 teachers. Budgetary changes from preliminary to proposed final. You'll probably recall seeing this sheet before, but what we tried to do is indicate, if you look to the left-hand side at the very top, the original, that reflects the preliminary budget you approved in February, and then obviously the right column represents what you're seeing this evening relative to our proposed final budget. So you can see the top two numbers are the same, but as you look down, you can see what items have changed relative to our operations from February 18th to present. Unemployment reserve. Obviously, with the outsourcing of our transportation drivers, there will be an exposure for the school district relative to unemployment for the first year. We calculate that at approximately $450,000. We obviously will need to set aside dollars to pay for that one-time expense, which after the conclusion of the next fiscal year would not entail any additional exposure to the school district. And the budgetary reserve of $250,000, we again spoke about that as well. We needed obviously to set up a portion of our budget for unanticipated expenditures, which, very similar to your household. You certainly don't want to have any unanticipated expenditures, but you're certainly happy to have the money if something were to break and you need to have it repaired. Our EIT tax interims as well as PERDA. As you can see, we reflected an increase, and that's a result of increased collections, primarily driven by EIT, the Earned Income Tax, as well as our tax assessments are gaining ground as well. So positive things on the local revenue front. Transportation subsidy as well as Evansburg State Park properties, I spoke about that before. But again, reflective of additional subsidy received relative to replacing our older bus fleet, as well as the Evansburg properties that pay the school district. And just for reference, the Evansburg properties are about $80,000 in annual revenue to the school district. IDEA Title I, Title II funding, the elimination of the federal sequestration cuts. I'm sure everyone's aware the government had automatic cuts built into the federal budget as a result of not coming to any type of consensus at the legislative level. We received notification after the preliminary budget that the federal funding for IDEA Title I and Title II was going to be restored to level funding for the next fiscal year, so that resulted in an adjustment to those areas as well. Interest earnings I spoke about, that we are realizing a significant increase as a result of actively moving funds around to the most advantageous interest-bearing account. We all know how lousy interest earnings are at the banks, but we are really taking a proactive approach in moving funds and maximizing the return. Our real estate tax, we have seen an increase relative to our real estate tax. But obviously, there's the offset, gaming funds. Any gaming funds that you receive, you have to decrease your overall taxes. We'll speak about that a little more as you can see the net impact of that particular line item. And then lastly, state FICA, PSERS, health services reimbursements. We'll receive a little bit of less subsidy due to the retirements, as well as a historical recap on looking back to our health subsidy reimbursement. That's decreased a couple of $1,000s. So you can see overall, if you look at our total revenue side, we're up pretty decently as far as looking at our preliminary budget to where we are presently. And just as a point of note, lower right-hand side, this dollar amount of $98,156,000 does not reflect any real estate tax increase. On the expenditure side, same format. So if you look down through, looking at our regular instructional expenditures, you can see a decrease. We have approximately 25 leaves during a year. A majority of those are unpaid. As we look at those and trend those out over the last few years, we adjust our budget based on the most recent information. So that, in conjunction with our recent retirements or notifications of retirements, our regular instruction budget has decreased nearly $200,000. Special education is up slightly from preliminary. You can see my description, somewhat abbreviated, but gives you a little bit of indication. As you can see, salaries decreased, the benefits are up, primarily driven by PSERS. Our legal decreased, but we have, our tuition, any placements we have of students, those costs are going up as well. Vocational ed, you can see that our costs to the North Montco, go ahead.
On that special education line, if salaries are decreasing since our budget, why would the benefits be up?
Great question. What happens when we outsourced transportation? What happens is there's certain parts of our budget that are driven out based on what the percentage of the salary is to the rest of the budget. For example, workers' compensation, tuition reimbursement. Some of those other items are distributed based on the salary relative to the total. So it's a percentage-driven model. So when we eliminated transportation, the percentage that they captured of those items was redistributed to the rest of the budget. So therefore, it would have increased those remaining areas of the budget because that dollar amount still needs to be captured. It's just captured by the rest of the areas of the budget.
So it would show up in each of the categories?
Correct. Correct. So as we look down through vocational ed, again, we have a slight decrease in the staff salaries, but the primary driver of that area is our North Montco budget for next year has decreased, which is always a good thing. Driver education, homebound, minimal decrease relative to a slight adjustment in the salaries for that particular line item. Pupil services, guidance, pupil services, a lot of the things that feed into this are professional services. As you can see, those are up, as well as supplies. Again, those are high-cost items for the school district and reflected in the pretty significant increase in that particular line item, primarily driven by special ed-related matters. Library, audiovisual staff development. What we did in this current year is we had changed the way we utilized Title II funds. Title II funds were previously used for professional development. What we have done is now the Title II funds pay for staff salary. It's a much more streamlined way to account for those dollars, and it allows us to use our general fund for the purposes of paying for those professional services, whether we use the entire grant, whether we use a portion of it. It's a lot easier of a handle from the perspective of dealing with the Title II funds. So as you can see, that the item had to be accounted for relative to the expenditure side of the budget. When we paid for the salaries, it decreased that, but we then had to shift those dollars over into the supply side of the budget, as you can see in the description. Looking down below, school board, principal, superintendent's office, assistant superintendent's office, benefits up again relative to the PSERS. Professional services, legal is a decrease again, adjusting relative to trends for the current year, and travel and supplies are down as well. Our nurses, again, slight decrease, primarily driven by salary decrease. Benefits are up, supply decrease. Again, the buildings reflected decreases across all of their budget categories relative to that 10% reduction I spoke about previously. Business office, we're up $63,000. The reason for that is we had insurance relative to our transportation department. Due to the outsourcing of that, those dollars, that budgetary line item came back into the business office portion of the budget. Facilities, a decrease in that particular line item. Your benefits are up, utilities are decreased, supplies decrease as well. That's relative to our request that the departments and buildings reduce their overall budgets. And again, our participation in the consortium for utilities and fuel is also saving the school district money. Transportation, as you can see, there's a decrease of $111,000. This item I've asterisked, this does not include the additional transportation subsidy, which is recognized on the revenue side, as well as the first allotted payment of $375,000 for the fleet sale. So those two items are not reflected on the expenditure side, they're reflected on the revenue side. Our technology budget, again, is a reflection of a decrease. The two items primary driving that is the MFPs. That's the swapping of the printers over to those multifunction machines from individual desktop units in each classroom, as well as our conversion over to CSIU for our financial software. Student activities, small decrease. As you can see that the salaries are decreased, benefits up again relative to PSERS primarily. Debt service is down slightly. Again, that's resulting of our most up-to-date adjusted debt schedule that we receive from our financial folks. And lastly, our budgetary reserve decreased from $250,000 to $200,000. So you can see overall expenditures are about $99.5 million. If we break that down into major categories, our instructional cost overall for the school district, $55.9 million. Our support services at about $30.8 million. Our non-instructional services, which are comprised of our extracurricular, is $1.4 million. Debt service at $10.9 million. Other financial uses, if you recall, this is the first year that we're recommending beginning to establish a sustainable means of paying for our capital projects throughout the district. We spoke at length in previous meetings about the sustainability of our capital reserve fund, and the way we were handling it previously, we were simply using the dollars out of the capital reserve fund without a way to replenish that. This way, we're looking to start a sustainable way to get that fund onto a level footing, and by establishing this initial line item for that purpose, we're looking to move that item forward to a level where we can take care of our capital needs on a long-term basis. And then lastly, our budgetary reserve, which would account for any of our unanticipated expenditures. So again, as you can see, our overall expenditures is about $99.5 million. Graphical representation of how our budget is drive. Obviously, the primary driver of our budget is instructional, which are classroom and related items, salaries, supplies, materials, etc., used in the classroom. Our support services, which would comprise everything from your principal's office, superintendent, business office would be captured within those areas. Non-instructional services, our debt obviously pays for all the construction and renovation, as followed up by our budgetary reserve and other financial uses, which is that establishing of the capital reserve fund. Local revenues, again, by major area. Local revenues, obviously the primary driver of our budget, $78.4 million. State revenues, about $19.6. The primary reason for the state revenues to increase is relative to the PSERS increase. The sharing of that cost between the school district and the state is on a 50-50 basis. So that is the primary reason that you see the state revenues going up. Federal funds, again, those reflect a slight overall decrease. Primary reason for that is medical access funded through that program has become very restrictive for school districts across the Commonwealth. And one of the areas that we're looking to fine-tune relative to our anticipated and projected revenue for the 14-15 versus the current year. And then lastly, miscellaneous. This is our allocation relative to our leases. Any of the leases that we do, we basically have a lease replenishment. We purchase the supply, whatever equipment it is throughout the year, take out a lease at the end of the year to reimburse the school district, and then spread those payments out over the balance of the lease term, whether it's 4 years, 5 years, whatever the case may be. And this item here, as you can see, the $99.5 million does reflect the 2.1% Act 1 index tax increase. Again, a graphical representation of the proposed final revenues, again, primarily driven by local sources, followed by the state. Federal makes up basically 0.5%, as followed by the miscellaneous, which again I spoke about of the lease reimbursements. The pension projections looking forward, as you can see, the far left column represents fiscal year. The column next to that to the right represents projected salaries, followed by the PSERS rate, what our contribution is on total, and then what that represents an increase. This does not reflect reimbursement back from the state, but it gives you an illustration of how costly the pension is going to, system is going to cost the school district. So you can see we're generating all the way up to about $15.5 million. And as you can see on 14-15, you'll see that there is a reduction between 13-14 and 14-15. That's a result of the transportation salaries no longer being reflected in our obligation relative to PSERS going forward. But as you can see, the rates as they are projected, based on the latest information we have, shows the rates going up over 30% over the following 5 years. The real estate tax, preliminary versus our proposed final. Under the preliminary budget, we were looking at a 4.5% tax increase relative to our Act 1 exception, as well as our PSERS and special ed exceptions, as noted down below at the bottom. We have since, if you look to the right, have been able to obviously fine-tune the budget as you go forward. And right now, we are looking at a 2.1% tax increase, which represent about $103 for the average homeowner. As Dr. Zerbe spoke about, we're recommending that we start establishing a pension reserve. Obviously, you just saw the rates relative to what we're looking at for the next 5 years for the pension obligation, and this is a way for us to start allocating a portion of our funds for the purposes of paying for the pension obligation. Just due to the cost, the constraints that this continually puts on the school district, it's a recommendation of the administration to begin allocating dollars for this purpose.
Let me just jump in on that.
Yep.
real quick.
Yep, go ahead.
So I think what's important, because this is new information for our board and certainly the public that have been in previous budget presentations, we know that the Finance Committee and made a recommendation to the board about keeping the tax increase not to exceed 2.1%. And we certainly heard that, and we worked extremely hard to provide that for you this evening. However, it wouldn't be responsible for us to not at least provide you some additional consideration that we would like you to consider. For example, many school districts, when they possibly can, are trying to address the pending cliff of the PSERS rate increases. So instead of finding ourselves possibly 3-4 years down the road with a 4-point-some% increase in any given year, we're suggesting that you at least consider the 0.4% increase as part of an amount that's put into an escrow that's held at the board's leisure to use in future offsets of the PSERS contributions, or if the state fixes the contribution and defined benefit program and removes the pending obligation that's before us, the board can so choose to use that money as they see fit, whether they put it back into the fund balance or they put it into the capital fund. But it's certainly something that does not, and I repeat, does not go into the operational budget for the district, but is again a consideration. So a 0.4% increase is a slight difference between going from 2.1% possibly in 4 or 5 years to a 4+% increase, when we would have to use our index as well as the exceptions in order to make the obligation and payments for those things. So I know we haven't had a lot of discussion about that, and when we finish our presentation, we can go back to the table and have that discussion so that we can at least flush this conversation out as per our current recommendation.
So if you look in the middle section, just to give you a point of reference, for the 13-14 year, our tax increase was 1.85 or half a mil, and which represented about $90 for the average homeowner. Homestead Farmstead, I spoke about this a few slides ago, but Homestead Farmstead was one of the items relative to Act 1 and all the items that feed into Act 1. Purpose of this was to use a portion of the gaming funds, the casino funds generated for purposes of offsetting folks' tax bill for their home or their farm. For 14-15 year, the Homestead Farmstead allocation from the Department of Ed It's about $1.9 million, which represents an increase of a little over $100,000 based on what we received for the current year. Based upon this allocation, any approved homestead farmstead property will receive a maximum tax reduction of $227 or about $12 additional over what they received for the 13-14 reduction, as you can see, of about $215. So what does this mean relative to looking at the tax increase? For the average homeowner, looking at our base budget of the 2.1%, what the average homeowner will receive as far as a tax increase would be about $103. Offsetting the increased allocation relative to the homestead farmstead would produce a net effect for the average homeowner of about $91 or about $7.60 a month. Inclusive of the pension reserve, which Dr. Zerbe and I spoke about, as you can see, the 2.5% would result in $123.50 average homeowner tax increase. The offset of the increased allocation of homestead farmstead, and then a net impact of approximately $111 or $9.27 per month. Where does Methacton rank relative to real estate millage and tax increases in Montgomery County? What this chart represents is over the last 10 years, all the school districts and their average percentage of increase relative to year to year. So as you can see, you have your lowest school district, which is Wissahickon, and then you have your highest, which is Upper Dublin. As it stands, Methacton is ranked 7th lowest in tax increases over that period of time. And then as far as millage rank, Methacton is ranked 9th lowest. So just to put that in perspective, as far as tax increases, percentages over a decade, we're in the bottom third of all the schools in Montgomery County, and we're in the bottom half relative to current millage rate. What are the next steps relative to the budget? May 27th, we would be asking for your approval of the proposed final budget, followed by public advertisement, which we have to comply with the state's calendar. That's a minimum of 20 days. That would allow us on June 17th for give recommendation for you to approve our final budget for 14-15. July 1, 2014 starts our next fiscal year. And that's it for the presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
We'll ask the board to just
Yep. There you go.
Okay, we'll...
We'll go to questions. Just make a couple comments. I just want to make a couple comments. It's important that the board also knows that there are certain things that aren't in the budget. As Mr. Whitelether went over, we talked about the potential elimination of the proposed ABG money. Typically, that was the amount of money that we were going to use to allocate towards funding the two full-day kindergartens that we had brief discussions on. I just want you to know that after we've communicated with the families that we felt were eligible for those programs, and after review of the most recent information regarding the state budget and the long-term sustainability of that pilot program, we did not feel that we could purposely put forward that pilot in a 4-year segment and fund it for each of the next 4 years so that we could gain the appropriate data to feed back whether or not that program is successful. So I do want the board and the public to know that we will not be moving forward for the 14-15 school year with the two full-day kindergartens that we had previous discussions on. However, we will be instituting the Jump Start program that we've had in place for the last couple of years, and we are currently working on that process to get it all scheduled and communicate with the families that are eligible for those services. We believe that that is a good program. We just felt that the 2 full-day programs would provide more intensive contact with teachers, and if we can do it in the future, I will bring it back to the table and ask for your approval on that, so long as we can do it in a time frame that allows us to study the impact of that over time, and not just a one-time shot and done deal. So I want you to be aware of that. So the full-day kindergarten program is not in the current proposed budget.
Any other comments, or?
Not right now.
Okay, so we'll open up to board questions. I had one question. So the 0.4% escrow, so you're asking us to make a philosophical decision that going forward, we're going to start doing this. Is that correct?
Well, I think I've gotten comments from board members through emails, and the question is this the right thing to do? And my answer is really I'm not certain, because I certainly am not of the nature to raise taxes just to put it into a savings account. But I feel that based on the information we have available to us today, by not acting on this pending problem, because I don't see a lot of movement at the legislature, I don't see a lot of movement in the governor to get this pension problem under control. I think, with the obligations that we have as a district, it should be something we should talk about. I'm not saying I know the amount. Certainly 0.4% does not give us anywhere near the amount we'll need 4 years from now, but it's an amount that we don't have today. And like I said earlier, it's a matter of are we ready to go off the cliff 4 years from now with a large tax increase to cover that obligation if nothing changes? Or should we ease our way into that process and make it more palatable for not only our board, but for our public? So that's the philosophical piece. I'm not certain what the right answer is, but I think it's appropriate that that other school districts are doing those types of things. So as we were working towards coming to you with a budget that was 2% or under, 2.1% or under, we discovered from talking with other districts that they were doing these types of things as well, and we felt that it was appropriate to bring it to the table.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's appropriate to discuss and for us to consider. I just want to make sure that, as the board thinks about it, we think about it long term. If this is something we're going to do, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do it this year just to increase taxes and then not ever do it again. So I think that we each have to think about philosophically, is this something that we want to do long term? So I wanted to make sure that essentially is a recommendation, is that, we consider doing this for the foreseeable future.
I think that should be the recommendation, but again, we are looking at a 5-year plan, trying to I can't tell you exactly what the budget will look like when we're going in January of 2015 and how things will work. We don't know that. So to say that we should make a commitment to do that, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I can tell you that it isn't a bad thing to do this once. If we can't do it, and with the intent of bringing it back to the table as part of our discussion through every budget year until the thing's fixed, or until we make another decision about the money. But we certainly can choose from year to year not to do it if we can't financially afford to. We originally came to the Finance Committee with a 2.5% recommendation. And we're back at that juncture, and we think that the 0.4% is a reasonable amount at this juncture.
Okay, fair enough. Don't want to beat a dead horse. Okay, questions for Stuart? Or go ahead.
Stuart, the $200,000 budgetary reserve, just a reserve?
Correct. If the district would not need to use that, it would not be expended.
Do you know what our reserve is at right now for this current year?
It's $200,000.
Okay. All right.
So it's 200,000 from last year.
From last year, right. Okay, so if that reserve is then not spent this year, it's just rolled into the next year's budget? And that's that, and that's that dollar amount, right?
Correct.
Okay. Second thing is, where do we stand on the Shannondale? I know we're still escrowing $500,000 a year for that.
Correct. The next year's budget still reflects the allocation of $500,000 relative to the pending assessment appeal for the Shannondale property. We're actively working to hopefully resolve that item, and hopefully that will be a positive resolution for the school district. But at this...
Excuse me, Stuart, that's a matter that's in litigation right now, so I would respectfully suggest that if the board is going to discuss that matter, that you do it in executive session. We can bring them up to date with respect to what discussions we've had thus far. I apologize, Herb, but I think it's an appropriate way to handle that.
Then I'm putting this out in the public now. I want this issue settled. This district cannot keep socking away all this money. How much is in that reserve, Stuart?
$1 million.
Need I say any more? Last point I want to make is the Peters pension reserve escrow. And I guess you just have to bear with me because I'm not in a great mood, but I don't feel we should do a darn thing to help the fat cats in the state Senate and the people in Harrisburg, because quite frankly, they're not doing a darn thing. Why should we? Okay, well, that makes it okay. That means that the taxpayers are going to have a huge tax bill. Well, maybe by then they will figure out that we can only do so much. Now, I know it's only a couple dollars more a month, but you know what? Last time I looked, my checkbook doesn't have a lot of extra money in it. And I understand putting 0.4% away for Peters, but what I don't understand is why there's $1 million sitting in a reserve fund. Okay, for how many years now we've been doing this, which I was not totally in favor for in the first place, and I'm making that public record too. But I do want to say that, you know, some of this, this budget is, as Jim says, keeps growing and growing and growing, and where does it stop? It seems to me that the only way we're going to get a message across is, unfortunately, is to put these big tax increases out there to the public and say, okay, guys, what are we going to do about it? And I'd love Senator Rafferty to come here and tell us what he's going to do about it. You know, he wants to run for re-election. Tell me about it, all right? Just getting a little bit tired of this. You know, we're running these big budgets every year, and I understand where the money's going, trust me. But there's no reason why we cannot put a cap on some of this stuff and have the state finally start to dig in their heels and figure a way out of this mess. Thanks.
Other questions? Brenda.
I think it's forward-looking to start thinking about recognizing that Peters is going to be a big problem down the road. I'm not happy, though, to suggest that the taxpayers fill that bill. I think that if we are diligent in working with our finances as the year goes by, if we find that we're able to economize and save some funds, that might be a good use of the money that we might save. One of the things that's discouraged me a little bit over my short tenure here so far is that we seem to continually always need to spend more money for this program or this contract or that contract because this group of people received a benefit. Now we must provide the same benefit to some other group of people. And it doesn't seem that there's ever any end to that kind of thinking. And I think that it's important that we think about how we do spend our money and what areas we might start to think about cutting, even if we approve some kind of a tax increase this year, which the Finance Committee did recommend that it not be any higher than 2.1% and preferably lower than that.
Just another question on Shannondale, and I don't think it'll be legal related. The $1 million balance we have, does that include a payment for this year, or is that to be made at sometime in the future for this fiscal year?
It only represents the Shannondale as of 14-15 would be $1.5 million would be the total on the account, inclusive of 14-15. Presently, it's $1 million. For 14-15, it would be an additional $500,000 into it.
Okay, thank you. I think I echo the comments of a few other people. The committee did recommend a 2.1. I'm still in that position myself. I appreciate the idea that we're having this conversation here. I'm just not prepared to act on it just myself, but I appreciate you thinking about it.
Go ahead.
Stuart, one question for us, the Shandell money, when we're at 1.5, if we use that towards a budget and we did not succeed in our case, and we'd have to take that 1.5, give it to Shandell, say they became, how do we get that money, that 1.5? Is it through the form of taxes? And if so, would we be in a situation where it might bump us up in an increase where we'd have to put it to referendum because we didn't have enough room in the Act 1 to make up for that 1.5?
I think to answer that question, it would be dependent upon what the final settlement is for that pending litigation. Depending on what the final settlement is, it could create a small problem, it could create a large problem, and therefore we would have to, address the problem as whatever size it is at that moment in time. I hate to be vague on this, but that's really, I can't tell you what it is until it's actually settled.
Just the converse of that, if optimistically we were to win it and we have $1 million, what happens to that money?
That would be a decision for the board.
We can decide what to do with it. Go to a general fund, go in capital reserve. So. Question? Kim?
Yeah. I think I remember in one of our recent meetings a PSBA report that spoke to some benefits statewide as a result of gambling money being rolled back into maybe homeowners for their property tax relief. Am I remembering this right, wrong? Is that right? And so does that factor into anything that we've seen tonight?
Yes, the gaming funds for this year amounts to about $1.8 million for Methacton School District. For next year, that amount's going to increase to a little over $1.9 million. So there's an additional $100,000 that's coming to the Methacton School District as a result of the increase in the gaming funds that are allocated for property tax reduction. So the benefit of that additional $100,000 for next year is going to result in an increase to the average homeowner of about $12. So they'll see a reduction of about $12 over what they received in 13-14 directly as a result of the additional allocation of funds derived from the gaming. It was part of the presentation, yeah. No, that's fine.
It's late. Other questions for the administration on budget?
Yeah, how do we get into the top 10% of those percentiles of tax increases? I want to go down on that list. I'm not sure if that was being put in there to say that we had more headroom to raise numbers or not.
It's a not so bad.
Yeah.
Your point's well taken. Other questions? Okay. So no vote tonight, no action tonight. I'm getting the sense that the board wants to approve a budget that does not have the escrow in it.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, someone can tell me that, but that's the sense I'm getting from my fellow board members here.
Okay. So we'll make sure that on the 27th we come with the budget without the escrow account. But again, as I hope you recognize it was just for your consideration.
No, I think that
certainly not something that I don't know what the right answer is here because it is a difficult decision. But together we'll work through this and we'll hopefully see some action in our legislature to deal with the overall pending issue.
No, I think it was a worthwhile discussion. I'm glad you guys are thinking about it and brought it to us. I think I echo Brenda. I think that there's got to be fat to trim, and we need to cut expenses to find money to escrow away. That, and I think that we need to increase our legislative activities and try and put pressure on Harrisburg to do something about this on that end, because that's really where it's going to be solved. Okay. All right, we'll move on. Dr. Zerbe, 7.2, scheduled speakers and presentations for next week.
Yes, so for May 27th, we're going to recognize some retirees. Senator Rafferty will be present to provide a citation for our golf team. Proclamation will be provided for perfect SAT scores. M awards will be provided, and ceremonial signing of first diplomas for our board representatives. Item 8, voting items for next week, the minutes, fiscal items, the list of bills, the treasurer's report, and we will ask the board to approve the North Monco Technical Career Budget in the amount of $11,238,757, as listed within the rest of that motion there. Item 4 there will also be asking for the final budget adoption. On 8.3, personnel resignations. Mr. Harney, do you mind picking that up for me, please?
Sure. We have 8 resignations on the agenda for next week. We have 1 personnel employment for next week. We have 2 compensated professional development leaves for next week, which, for point of clarification, is sabbatical would be the term you'd probably be more familiar with for that. Personnel uncompensated leave, we have 2 for next week. We're asking for the approval of the attached list of community educators and also the addition of 2 more folks on the classified substitute list. I also wanted to point out that next week with the retiree recognition, there will be a reception, as we do every year. If the weather's nice, we did it outside, right outside in the courtyard out there. It worked out very nicely, so we'll be having something, just so you know, for the retirees after the board meeting.
Under 8.13, curriculum and programs, we will provide to the board the diplomas for the members of the Methacton High School class of 2014 who meet the graduation requirements. We will ask for the approval to submit Title I, Title II, and Title III grants, federal grants, and we will ask for the acceptance of 2 gifts as listed in the agenda.
Speaking of gifts, there was discussion of having mascaros at a board meeting to recognize their gift. Is that still in discussion? Are we just timing, or?
That was in discussion. It hasn't been for maybe 2 weeks, so I will pick that up and get that back on target for the board.
Yeah, they did an amazing thing for the community, so we should try and recognize them.
Absolutely, thank you. Under 8.14 policy, working with the policy committee, we are bringing forward for the first reading policy 246, to student wellness. Policy 8.15 for second readings, policies 114, 116, 17, 18, 610, 611, and 800. Those are the gifted education, tutoring, homebound, independent study, purchasing, and records management policies. 8.16, under other, we have an appointment of the board treasurer and Danielle Penza to serve as a treasurer. We'll have an appointment of the school physician and Jeffrey Brand, appointment of the football team physician and Timothy Allman, and appointment of the school dentist in Sheldon Prochow. That's all I have on the agenda.
Okay. Non-voting items for discussion, anything else?
I don't have any items.
Does anyone have any new business? Okay, courtesy of the floor. Candy?
Eagleville. I have a couple questions. I know we're not supposed to ask questions on items and everything, but I have a couple questions. The first thing, has Mr. Whiteleather factored in, I'm curious what our insurance premiums are going to be next year, since a huge lawsuit was just settled, and I'm sure it's going to affect our insurance premiums. Because I did speak to someone in the insurance industry, and he said that's school district's going to take a nice hit on that. So I want to know if this is factored in to the new budget that's coming up and how much that's going to help. And I also want to know exactly what cuts have been made to this budget. I mean, any slashing and burning. I mean, Mr. Phillips asked what exactly can we do with the budgets. Stop giving everybody raises. A couple years ago, there should have been a pay freeze put. 4 years ago, when the teachers threatened to go on strike and everybody got scared, their pay should have been frozen in a bad economy. And now, you turned around in September and just handed them the keys to the school district with nothing brought in front of the public, no public discussion, everything was informal. And then, a tentative agreement, and when I brought it up at the May 6th meeting, I didn't realize that everything with the teachers was settled April 25th because the public's not been made aware. Trust me, the teachers are not the golden calves. Just because everybody's afraid of their union, and trust me, I appreciate teachers. My daughter's a teacher. I wish she made as much as the public school teachers do. She's in a private school. She teaches children that none of the other school districts want because they're bad children. And she came home the other day proud of the fact that she brought their test scores up, the kids in her classes. And I wish she got paid what they get paid here. Now, I know what happens in this school district. I put 2 kids through. They need to be held accountable for our test scores. I've said this for years. For what they're getting paid, we should have test scores going through the roof. But you handed it to them. Tonight, you got rid of our bus driver. Guarantee you got rid of our bus drivers. So all that voted to bring in First Union, I hope you know how to drive a bus. Because I have a very bad feeling, and I'm usually good on this, we're going to have a problem come September. And First Student is a monopoly. And monopolies are not a good thing. Aramark is a monopoly. They don't have a good reputation. And I'm sure, First Student told us how great they are. Of course they're going to say that. And they brought up Norristown. Norristown's had a lot of problems. But when you get pigeonholed and you have no one else to go to drive your buses, you got to stay with what you have. And this is going to come back to bite us. And we're going to get stuck buying back our own buses. That's going to cost us more money. If you want to save money in this district, stop spending it. Sit on your money. I know that's an old-fashioned concept, putting it under the mattress, but it might just work. Stop looking for ways to spend it. Take our tax money and find good ways to spend it. We have to do this in our homes. We have to balance our checkbooks. We have to know what we can afford and what we can't afford, or we'll lose it. The school district has to do the exact same thing. And the taxpayers would probably like you for it. But you really have to listen. No matter how well you paint the picture, we're really not in good shape. We don't know what's going to happen 5 years down the road. We don't know what's going to happen 6 months in this country. The economy, they say, looks like it's recovering, but it's not. People are still hurting. People in the school district are still losing their jobs. And I have to worry every month how I'm going to pay my bills. Now I have to worry how I'm going to come in with a tax increase. I know Mr. Whiteleather was cheerleader for First Student. I'm just curious what bus service his school district used, his previous one. It's easy to find out. I can Google it. But this was something you really needed it. You lost, I'm guarantee you lost a lot of good people tonight. And they were loyal. They were the definition of loyalty. You lost the loyalty from the same thing happened with the lunch ladies. They were told they could apply for their job. Well, a number of them did. They applied for the job and they never heard back. So they can say they'll keep their job. They can apply for their job and not hear back. And maybe I'm cynical or I don't trust them, but you lost a lot of experience in this room tonight. And if this thing goes south, the board should be ashamed. And if it goes south, then the people that voted to get rid of our bus drivers should resign.
Additional public comment, or, I'm sorry, courtesy of the floor? Okay.
Joe Bickelman, Audubon. Yeah, it's sad that the nearly 120 bus drivers were terminated tonight. I think it's a sin that had to happen. Regarding the comments by, I think it was Mr. Williams from First Student, and you might want to be on the alert, the board might want to be on the alert for 5 years down the line. I think in those other school districts, the Abingtons, the Cheltenhams, and all the other districts, I think First Student probably thought they were entrenched, and they put their RFP in maybe a little high. They might have came in a little high, so 5 years from now, when you go out for RFPs, you know, they might be, you know, jacking up the price, and they're just not in the ballpark. So, you know, that's one thing to be aware of as you go forward. The other thing I have, 120 drivers were terminated. They didn't resign, they were terminated as of June 30th. And 120 drivers, I don't know how many food service people there were, let's say 50 food service people got terminated. So that's about 170 employees. When there's additional work, sometimes we give stipends out to people. Now there's 170 less people, okay? The director of, in order to save a little bit more money, the director of transportation's salary, he has 120 less people to take care of. His secretary has 120 less people to keep track of, licenses, payroll, things like that. The HR department, 170 people less work. The benefits department, less work. So the payroll department, 170 people entering hours every 2 weeks. So those salaries you might want to take a look at. Maybe you can tweak them, can I say downward? Because of the staffing reductions. So there might be some savings there. As far as the cost, I didn't hear anything about, on the audit report every year, there's a line saying there's a liability of the district for compensated absences. I didn't hear how much the district is going to pay out in unused sick days to the bus drivers. The drivers that accumulated days and they have 35 days or 100 days, and they get paid so much when they leave the district. I didn't hear a number for that. So that's something to make note of in case you forgot that. Last month you recognized Pete Iannozzi as a bus driver. He received a plaque. He was here for 18 years. My wife's been here almost 20 years. Other drivers have been here longer, so I think you need to recognize those drivers on an individual basis and have them at a board meeting and have them come up, because they're done with the district, they're terminated. So they should be recognized for their services. Just something to think about.
Thank you. Additional courtesy of the floor, sir.
Andrew Sander, I'm a Lower Providence resident for 14 years. 2 children in Arrowhead Elementary School. One child coming on in this coming September. And I actually want to talk about some good news, I think, about the district. And then, you know, a couple things that I have concerns that I think I have maybe a solution for. But, you know, Methacton is ranked in the 93rd percentile of schools in Pennsylvania. That's pretty incredible, the top 7% of schools. So the tests are showing that the teachers are getting results, and that the school board has put, you know, even in tough economic times, as was pointed out, and I know, you know, it's not, oh, well, we got room for improvement because we've only been in the top third of, in the bottom third of people increasing taxes, but in order to do that and continue to be in the 90s, in the 93rd percentile, is pretty incredible. I think that that's something to be commended to the board and to the teachers and to the community, because obviously the community is a big part of that. That's really important. And residents get value from this in home inequity, and they get value in this in the quality of life. I mean, nobody can say when you have a bad educational institution, typically you don't have a good township. You don't have a good quality of life where you walk around happy, everything's good. And Methacton is terrific for that, and that's why I moved here 14 years ago, which was 5 years before I even thought of having my first child. And paid a premium for my home. What I want to talk to you a little bit about is something personal, and that's the incoming 2014-2015 kindergarten class. We had talked about a little bit in some prior meetings. There was a potential for a full-day kindergarten class, and there were some students that are identified that had some special needs. Understand, obviously, we've talked a lot about the budget tonight, so it's a good time for me to talk, that with the budget being so tight, to add 2 additional full-time teachers plus potential additional facilities and technology to handle those classes is very expensive. And how do you do that and forecast it over 5 years to get the data, to say it worked, to get the grant, right? One of the things right now, I talked with Dr. Zerby actually, and one of the goals for our kindergarten classes are to be no greater than 22 students, which is kind of an average number. If you look, it's very hard to determine, but I did a lot of research and looked. An average nationwide, statewide would be like 22 students. And if there's a given elementary school that has a high enrollment, say that the class would be 25 students, they may look at another school that has a lower enrollment to kind of commingle. In physical sense, that makes physical sense, right? If we have a school that's got 15 students in a class and a school has 28, maybe we should move a few students to that other school. And there's a lot of intangible things which have to be considered by doing that. That kind of started me. That was my first thing, and then I started looking at the evidence, and there's voluminous evidence that says the optimal size for a kindergarten class should be about 18 students. Right? I'm realistic. I know that we can't build buildings and add teachers to have 18 students in a class. I think that would be, very hard. Although, if that's optimal, and we are an optimal school in the 93rd percentile, should we have 22 students, which is average, 50th percentile, right? Does that building block, and I think even Methacton considers kindergarten to be the building block of our children's educational success. That's an actual Methacton publication, right? So I think it's agreed that kindergarten is one of the key areas. And in my experience with 2 children going through the kindergarten program at Arrowhead, which is actually in the 96th percentile for elementary schools in the state of Pennsylvania, I mean, it's kind of incredible. It's just phenomenal. It's really terrific. And as this, some of the parents have gotten together and we're okay. We can't physically get to 18 students. We know that. So if 22 students is a goal, that's a pretty good thing. But there is an alternative of having a teacher's aide. And a teacher's aide is, I know, something that as budgets had to be cut and people didn't have union protection, you could kind of eliminate teacher's aides, right? And I'm realistic. I'll give you up front, I'm a CPA, and I've done tons of budgets and gone through lots of things. So I appreciate what you guys go through. But I kind of estimated, and I put the question out to Dr. Zerby so we can discuss this further, but maybe a fully burdened cost of a teacher's aide would be like $25,000. There's like half of a percent of what our school budget is. And it gives a lot of the benefits that the 18-student class gives. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck with this teacher's aide, because a lot of the benefits of the smaller class is that one-on-one interaction with a really good teacher. And it's important to note, you can look in studies and say, there was a big move underfoot over the last 10 years before the economic crisis to mandate small class sizes. And that led to a lot of trouble in some places because you hired lesser quality teachers. And you had new teachers. So in the case of bringing in a student aide, well, we've got teachers in a district that's in the 93rd percentile that we're going to assist to give a better education for potentially larger classes. And there's a study being done to see what the long-term, what we think enrollments are going to be and that kind of thing. But I think we really need to look at, before the June 17th vote on the budget, if we want to put something in there to assist the school. I know Arrowhead is a school that is over right now. They're looking at 49 students for 2 classes, so that would be a 25 and a 24 class. And there is potential that there's another school that we know of that kind of has low, and you can't get final numbers till August, which I totally understand, because there'll be some people that say, I needed the full day, so some people might pull out.
Sir, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off because we're running out of time.
Okay. Yeah, so the net of it is, I think we have a solution. Mr. Phillips said, let's bring solutions to the table. I say that there's a problem. I think there's a very economical solution to that problem, and I'd like the board to consider it. I had a handout. I only made 5 copies, and I can email it.
If you give it to Dr. Zerby, you can make sure we all get it.
It gives a lot more detail to what I did in like a little executive summary.
Okay.
All right?
Appreciate it, thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional courtesy of the floor?
My name is Kathleen Schlenker, and I am a Lower Providence resident and a proud Methacton mom. I am coming to the board out of a request of the dumbest technologically inept mother of Methacton. And I don't know if this is something we can do or not do. But as a mom of 4 kids who are in Methacton, only 2 left in Methacton, I'm tired of children coming home to me and saying, "Mommy, I don't understand this computer software program I have to do for school." And I look at them dumbfounded like, huh? You can be glad I can turn it on and send you an email, you know? I'm not the technology person. And I guess my question is, and I've talked to a couple other parents over the last couple weeks about things that are going on, teachers are bringing programs to students. Students aren't understanding them, and they're coming home in tears. Is there any way, as a district, that these great technology guys that we have, and they are awesome because they've answered a lot of questions for me on the sideline, you know, when I see them throughout the building, that they could go and do a class for parents to bring parents up to date on the latest program. The latest one was Animoto. I don't even know how to say it, let alone get into it. But I had a 13-year-old in tears because she couldn't finish her project. And I finally just said, Nathan, to the 10th grader, do it for her because I don't know what to help her with. You know, so I'm just thinking, is there a way that the school can help us as parents that are not technically inclined to know how to do this stuff? You know, if someone teaches me, I can do it. If I'm not taught, I can't do it.
Well, I think we're right on the cusp of a great idea, so I appreciate you bringing it to the table. I've not heard this comment before, but I want you to know that if you would be so kind, within the next day or so, if you could either call me, meet with me, we'll talk about the items that are of concern, and we'll look to engage our technology department as well as our community ed program to see if we can't address some of those concerns like you're suggesting. You know, help our parents help our students, because I certainly understand coming from a technology background, it's easy for me, but my wife has those similar types of concerns that it sounds like you share. So I think that's a good suggestion. If you would mind setting an appointment up with me, and we can get together and address those issues.
Yeah.
And maybe bring this to the table for the parents throughout the Methacton community.
Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion.
Additional items for courtesy of the floor?
I just have one question.
Go ahead.
What would happen if the school district, or any of the school district, maybe Mr. Barlow can answer that, when it comes to Peters, and you guys just say, no, we're not going to pay the increase? Our taxpayers can't afford it. I mean, maybe if 500 school districts all did that, kind of like a sit-in type. But actually, what would the ramifications?
They would take Dr. Zerbe off in handcuffs.
You know, if you just said no.
I think they'd probably arrest somebody.
If we say no, we would actually owe more money than we would have, so it would just continue to escalate through fines and
Because see, nobody's ever said, you know, what would happen if you say no. I honestly believe, the numbers are a great thing if all the school districts just stood up and went, you know what, we can't do this anymore.
Well, I think a better
Rafferty and Burr would listen.
A better option is probably, to your point, legislative, right? We need to do a better job at legislatively going after this. I think breaking the law is probably not the best way for us to go. But we'll take it in consideration.
Sometimes it works, but remember, it's election year this year.
But I will say this, in defense of our local legislative constituency, they know it's a problem, and they are working hard to do this. Senator Rafferty, Representative Verb, our representatives are working to address the issue. It's just not something that seems to be an easy solution. Yeah,
I was just curious, I didn't know what would happen if you just said no.
I think there would be arrests. John.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I've been coming to school board meetings starting in 2005. I think back then Mr. Bartlett was a young man. Each year there's a budget. Some years the board bends over and thanks the administration for doing all the work on it. And again this year, I bet deep down inside that aside from coming up with a number of 2.1%, we have 8 directors who again have relied totally on the administration. Over that time, I've spoken about enrollments. And again this year, there's a thing called School Finance 101 that the state puts out, PDE puts it out. Various factors will affect budgetary decisions. Some of these include size of the enrollment. Whether it was Dr. Miller, Dr. Stevenson, Dr. Quinn, and now Dr. Zerbe, it's silence when it comes to enrollment. With regard to the high school, enrollment is down by 200 since 2008. We have the same exact staff. That's about as sensical as asking us to build up a reserve for PSERS. The PSERS problem is in Harrisburg. The enrollment problem is in Methacton. A few years ago, as a small firm, I was one of the bidders for an enrollment projection here. The board decided not to bid that job out. I'm not saying I was the high bidder or the low bidder. It was a board decision not to bid it out. At that time, I had done enrollment projections for the 10 years, and for the first 2 years, my enrollment projection for K-5 was dead on. That's like how many? 3 holes in one on one golf day. Last year, I did a bid over to Upper Merion, and my projection for the enrollment for this year was, I think it was 4147. The winning outfit came up with 4142 for this year, after getting 30,000 to do what I did in a few hours. I'm not bragging about myself. I'm trying to hit on the board not doing its job. Quinn repeatedly said, we're keeping class enrollment, class sizes constant. You're not doing that. You're not thinking of the taxpayers. That's wrong.
As a matter of fact, the comments just made about having silence related to this issue, whether from the board or from a superintendent, this current board and this current superintendent have not been silent related to enrollment and capacity. In fact, minutes so reflect that the Finance Committee made a recommendation to the board, who subsequently approved the superintendent to seek a consultant to help with enrollment and capacity. It certainly, the truth of the matter is, it certainly does not reflect any that study is not reflective of any changes or recommendations in the proposed 14-15 budget. However, we hope to be able to provide the district with information in the coming months so that they can reasonably consider that information as we progress forward. So I just want to make it clear for the record that this board and this administration has not been silent on that issue, and we are addressing it. Unfortunately, we can't do everything in one full swoop. So I just want to make that point.
Thank you. Additional items of courtesy of the floor?
How do I get information from administration? If I would need some information, how do I go about it? What's the process?
Make a request to the administration's office.
I did that in an email and I didn't get any response.
If you're looking for information, you can file a right-to-know request. The information regarding that is on the website.
Is that the process I should go through just for like everyday information? You know, how many?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, there's information that's posted on the website as part of the backup materials for board meetings. Angela Lynch is our right-to-know officer. There's requests to be made to her. To solicitor's point, that information is on the website.
Is there an enrollment report that's part of the agenda every month?
I don't think it's not every month.
Yeah, there typically is, yes.
It's in the agenda? Up there?
It's not in this. It'll be for on the 27th.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Additional courtesy of the floor? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Jim, second. Kim. All those in favor? Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you.